to you. Or is it still showing Bill is muted?
Okay, I'll stop. Okay.
Well, good afternoon on this snowy day in Cincinnati. Welcome to another Community Issues Forum sponsored by Christ Church Cathedral downtown, once again by Zoom. We've been doing these Zoom. The COVID pandemic started. So today we're really fortunate to have an old friend and community leader, Damon Lynch III, pastor of New Prospect Baptist Church, who's just done a really superb piece of work, collection of his writings and sermons in Becoming Joshua, subtitled A Path to Economic Freedom. And he's really talking about how you use economic community change or development in terms of making a successful, especially African-American communities. But it's a wide expanse in the writing, relating that to the Gospels and relating that to the Old Testament. Joshua leading people really to develop the new promised land. So we seem to have quite a few people with us, and others will be joining us. But we want to give Pastor Lynch time to talk and you time to ask some questions about the very critical question of how we create through economic community development some successful communities, because we've all been worried about the increase in poverty, the increase in homelessness, and of course this pandemic has only worsened the situation. So there's a lot to do. Some of us have been especially impacted and working on the affordable housing situation, but I think Damon Lynch has a lot to tell us about economic community development today. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Damon, and we can go from there.
All right, Bill, thank you. And thank you for having me on the forum. Also, you can hear me, right? I'll make sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. So you and Ed have been friends for now over 30 years. And I thank you for the friendship and the work that we've done together here in the city of Cincinnati. So I just wanted to get that out. I also want to thank Peter Block and Barbara Rohr, whom I've known for years as well, who have heard me speak many times and have seen some of my writings, and they thought that I had something worth saying and that something that people would want to hear. So I thank them for encouraging me to put this work together. I do also need to thank my parents. Many of you know my mom and dad, Damon and Barbara Lynch, who raised two beautiful kids, myself and my sister, and did an excellent job. So just as proud as they are of me, I am just as proud of them. I need to thank my wife, my beautiful wife, Regina, and my three handsome children, who are all doing great. So the work is entitled Becoming Joshua, A Path to Economic Freedom. It is part of my journey. It is a compilation of speeches and writings and sermons and musings that I've had over the years. And it also speaks about my transition in how I see my ministry and my work in community. So I'm going to break it down in 4 parts. We're going to have a theological discussion. It's what the pamphlet deals with. A historical discussion, a psychological discussion, and finally, a practical discussion All four of those things are interwoven in this work entitled Becoming Joshua. So it starts with a theological discussion. And this is what changed the way that I operate and the way that I work. So on page 1 in the document, and hopefully Bill will be able to put the link because it's online. It's a free document. There are hard copies at the church and at Roadshow Awards and Graphics. It is also free. But the theological discussion starts here. It says, when I read the Bible, I read it as the living word of God. I see it as a launching pad for what the God of Israel has done and can still do. In Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 and 14, we find God talking to Abraham. He says, know for certain that your descendants will live as strangers in a land not their own. They will be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. But I will judge the nation they serve, and afterward, they will come out with great possessions. In 2019, it had been 400 years since the first Africans were brought to these shores and landed in Jamestown, Virginia. It's been a 400-year journey for African Americans in this country. And I think many of us know what those 400 years have been like. The first 245 to 246 years were spent in slavery, fighting to be free, followed by another 101 years of Jim Crow segregation. Those 300 and almost 50 years have not been a picnic for African Americans. But we reached the 400-year mark, and that is now time for what I call true emancipation. Most of my ministry and my life was spent trying to be the Moses to the African American community. I thought that God had called me to lead us out of bondage, lead us out of the struggles that we were in. But then I realized that that had already taken place. In the 20th century, we had courageous individuals such as Dr. King, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, Rosa Parks, Medgar Evers, Fred Shuttlesworth, Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, and they did that work of leading us out of bondage. But in the scriptures, you go from the Moses narrative to now the Joshua narrative. And that's why the work is entitled Becoming Joshua. It was Joshua's job to then lead the children of Israel into the promises, into the land that God had promised, to have strength and courage and build their own communities. And so I've understood that it's important now that we in the Black community move from the need of a Moses to deliver us to becoming the Joshuas, the builders of our communities, our families, our businesses, and all those things that make up a strong, healthy community. So theologically, my move was, it's time to build. It's time to possess. It's time to prosper. That is what is the line throughout the entire work, theologically. But then historically, I go to page 4 and I list out some history. And there is a story entitled Too Prosperous to Be a Negro. And I want to share that with you. It says the period following the Civil War was one of economic terror. One story that is told is of Elmore Bowling, a successful small businessman who lived in Alabama in the middle of the last century. Bowling leased a plantation where he had a general store, a gas station, and a catering business. He was a one-man economy. He grew cotton, corn, and sugarcane. He also operated a small fleet of trucks that ran livestock and made deliveries between Loudonsboro and Montgomery. At his peak, he employed as many 40 people, all of them Black. One day in December 1947, a group of white men showed up along a stretch of Highway 80 that Bowling helped lay. There near his store and home, where he lived with his wife Bertha and their 7 children, the men shot him 8 times. His family rushed from the store to find him lying dead in a ditch. The shooters did not even cover their faces. They didn't need to. Everyone knew who had done it and why. He was too prosperous to be a Negro, someone who knew Bowling at the time told a newspaper. When Bowling was killed, his family estimates he had as much as $40,000 in the bank and more than $5,000 in assets, about $500,000 in today's dollars. But within months of his murder, nearly all of it would be gone. White creditors and people posing as creditors took the money the family got from the sale of their trucks and cattle. They even staked claims on what was left of the family's savings. Overnight, the Bowlings went from prosperity to poverty. Bertha May worked at a dry cleaner. The older children dropped out of school to help support the family. Within 2 years, all the Bowlings fled the country, fearing for their lives, or fled the county, fearing for their lives. Left behind were Bowling's employees who had all lost their livelihood and a means to support their family. Such wealth stripping has left African Americans at a lasting economic disadvantage. There's strong history to why we are where we are. I also talk in this work about this place called Kenyon Bar. And many of us know the West End of Cincinnati, and we may have heard the story of Kenyon Bar. It's entitled A Disappearing Neighborhood on page 10. It says, have you ever heard of Kenyon Bar? Perhaps not, but you have heard of the West End, or Queensgate as it is now known. Kenyon Bar was a vibrant Black community until the city decided to take the land for light industrial development. They cleared the houses, they cleared the shops. 2,000 buildings were destroyed, 26,000 people were forced to move away, their community destroyed. Before the destruction began, the city went out into the neighborhood and took photographs of what they were about to tear down. The photos show people outside their homes and shops engaged in their lives. They had no idea what was about to happen. As for the light industrial development the city envisioned, it never really took off. Kenyon Bar is a story that people hear it, and the first time I heard it, I was at a conference, a forum, probably similar to this, and there was a presentation on Kenyon Bar, and everybody was aghast. They was like, oh, wow, how could they do that? How could that happen? How could they destroy an entire community of Black people? And it doesn't always seem interesting that the communities that are always gentrified and have displacement are communities of people of color. But people were all so aghast at what happened at Kenyon Bar. And I was the next speaker after the presentation. And I said, well, if we're so aghast at what's happening at Kenyon Bar, why can't we see what's happening today? So 30 years from now, people will look back on what happened in Over the Rhine or Avondale or Bond Hill or Roselawn or Madisonville. And they will look back 30 years from now and go, wow, how did they just take all that land? How did they just move people out and bring in the gentry? And they will have the same feeling about what's happening today as we do in what happened in Kenyon Bar. But why can't we see it today? Many of you know for 23 years, I pastored in Over the Rhine, and I loved every second of it. I loved the people. I loved the community. I was not so enamored with the Italianate architecture as others were. I fell in love with the people. Now the community has changed. It's transformed. At one point, it was the most serviced community in the state of Ohio. Every social service agency known to humankind resided in Over the Rhine. Those agencies are now gone, and so are most of the people, which proves two things. While it was the most serviced community in our state, it was still considered one of the worst communities. So obviously, surrounding people with services does not make them whole. And what is so interesting now that it is a community that is written about in the New York Times and Forbes magazine as a great revitalization. Guess who else? Not only are the people gone, Drop-In Center, you're gone. City Gospel Mission, you're out. The service providers are gone. When we look at the history, we also have to look at present day situations. And then I talk in this work about the psychological. On page 13, I write something that I think is extremely important. This history has left much damage that needs to be repaired. The debt clock never stops. America owes a tremendous debt that has never been acknowledged, let alone paid. The psychological pain and the psychological damage to the African Americans in this country is deeper than monetary debt because the damage is mental. The damage is damage to the soul. Repairing this soul damage involves forgiveness, but it's hard to forgive when those who need to be forgiven won't even acknowledge the pain they have caused. I also mentioned the psychological on page 3, because I think this is important. This is a very real and serious effect from the more than 350 years of slavery and Jim Crow and its negative impact on the psyche of most African Americans. That impact is this: it is an overriding sense of inferiority that maybe not all, but most African Americans live with. We wake up with it every day. While white Americans wake up to white privilege that most don't even acknowledge, white Americans never doubt their place in our society. While we who are Black are continually trying to fit in, trying to belong, asking, what do we deserve? To wake up every day with that slight tinge of inferiority is a burden that most African Americans carry. Every morning I drive my daughter to school. She goes to school in Glendale, a school called Bethany. And when I leave Glendale, I make my way to the church. I drive through Woodlawn and Lincoln Heights. And then when I do that, I notice in the many yards, there are these signs that say Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. And you've probably seen those signs as well. I see them in Roselawn. I see them in a lot of different Black communities. But do you ever think, why is that even necessary? What group of people in this country have to put signs in their yards to say we matter? What does that do? What does that say about our mental state? That we have to live with the fact of this innate sense that we're just not quite there, that there's still something we have to assert about ourselves. Black lives matter. That is the psychological damage that we faced ever since we came here in 1619. And then I do get to the practical. The premise that I have is that it's time for us to build our own communities and to use processes. If America has resegregated, and it has, since Dr. King gave that awesome speech at the Lincoln Memorial, and we are more segregated now than we've ever been before. And now it's not segregation by law, it's by choice. If we are going to be resegregated, then somehow we need to make segregation work in the Black community. We have to build and rebuild our own communities. So on page 17, I mentioned the work of the collaborative agreement, the work that we did in changing how policing is done in our city and other cities as well, Ferguson, New York City. And I mentioned how we focused on changing policing. But when we woke up, we lost the entire communities, especially the community of Over the Rhine. And I said, we have to be able to fight these battles on both fronts. So the practical things, and hopefully you all will get the document and tell me what you think. On page 17, I mentioned that we have to do two things in the Black community. We have to raise consciousness and we have to build wealth. The raising of consciousness and the building of wealth. Because if we raise consciousness and not build wealth, then we're just talking a good game. And if we build wealth in the African American community without consciousness, then we won't build a strong, healthy, vibrant community for all. So what I say is there's a few things we need to do. Number one, Traditionally in this country, this is on page 18, the effort has been toward community and economic development. The city of Cincinnati has a division called community and economic development. We need to remove the and. So it's no longer community and economic development, but it is community economic development. With the and in place, the community is serviced to the point where it becomes a service community. That is a community dependent upon the services provided by others. It focuses on what a community lacks. When economic development becomes separate from community development, developers are able to come in, buy the land, make renovations with no understanding or appreciation of what it may mean to the community of people who live there. Economic development builds wealth for the developers. If a community is engaged in its own economic vitality, which is what community economic development processes are all about, there is no way that a government can do it without the community reaping the benefits. Community economic development is a key component in asset-based community development. ABCD builds community wealth by recognizing that surrounding people with social services does not make them whole. If it did, Over the Rhine would have been the best community in America. But yet we have to use people's assets, gifts, resources, and abilities. I talk about individual development accounts, IDAs, which are savings accounts to help individuals of low income address their financial needs and achieve financial stability. I also talk about the building of a community fund. Another aspect of the ABCD is a community fund. A community fund is quite simply one in which the community has invested. It is a type of investment fund where those who are most affected are the first contributors. In order for a member of the fund, you have to be a resident of the community or own a local business in the community and become a stakeholder and be able to make decisions. I say in order for community development to be successful, everyone in the community needs to contribute something or at least be encouraged to contribute. That is because everyone has something to give. Everyone has a gift, and it's imperative not only to our own lives and the lives of our families, but for the life of the Black community. And then finally, and there's a lot more, and hopefully you get to read it, I give what's called a roadmap ahead. Near the end of the book, there's a roadmap ahead. And there are 4 initiatives that I think are important as we rebuild our communities. Number 1 is the community education plan. In England, they have something called supplementary schools, where on Saturdays, little Black kids go to school to learn about their history, their heritage, and their cultures. We need to supplement the education of our children. The public school systems do the best they can. Those who can afford private schools send their kids there. But I think we have a responsibility as a Black community to teach our own children. I grew up in North Avondale, and at the time I grew up there, it was a Black Jewish community. All my friends were either Black or Jewish. And my Jewish friends on Sunday went to what's called Sunday school, where they learned their language, they learned their history. And we need that for our Black community as well. I talk about a community safety plan. Safety has to be the community's responsibility. A large amount of the city budget goes towards public safety, and yet too many people live in unsafe conditions, unsafe communities. And the community safety plan is outlined in the booklet as well. And then I talk about a community energy plan. And this is the one that I put the greatest focus on, the community energy plan. When people come to our church, New Prospect, for help, it's usually one of 2 things: being able to pay their rent or being able to pay their gas and electric bill. And the community energy plan allows the Black community to harness the energy of the sun to provide clean and safe energy to our homes, to even to low and moderate income people. And it is a doable plan. I share, and I think I shared it in this book, there are smaller ethnic groups in our country who control major economic sectors. The Korean American community controls the Black hair care sector. The Asian community, or the Indian community, controls the motels. It's called the Patel Motel Cartel. The Cambodian Vietnamese community controls nails, manicures, and pedicures. The Ethiopian community controls parking. If you park anywhere in downtown Cincinnati where there's an attendant, 9 times out of 10, he or she is of Ethiopian ethnicity. The Arab American community and Indian community controls the gas stations and corner stores. Smaller ethnic minority groups control major economic sectors, and they're actually called nonlinear economic sectors, which means they control economic sectors that aren't tied to their history, heritage, or culture, but they control those sectors. After 400 years, you are hard pressed to ask, what economic sector does the African American community control? And I think energy, clean energy, is the one where we can have an impact. Who better to harness the sun than those who have been kissed by the sun? And so I've been in conversation with a number of people, but I've met with a guy named Donnell Baird, D-O-N-N-E-L, Baird, B-A-I-R-D, who started Block Power in New York, in Brooklyn. And he and a gentleman by the name of Michael Geekin from the Industrial Areas Federalization or Foundation, IAF, are willing to come to Cincinnati to help the Black community build its economic power around affordable housing and sustainable energy. All my life, I've been a doer. I've never believed that we can't do it. When the state of Ohio allowed medical marijuana and passed that law, I knew that the African American community was going to be cut out of it. And so out of 56 dispensary licenses that were given, only 2 were given to African American groups. 1 group started by me. I started the Community Economic Advancement Initiative to rebuild Bond Hill and Roselawn. We purchased an abandoned grocery store that we're bringing back to life to bring fresh fruit and vegetables to the community. We purchased 4 acres in Roselawn to build affordable housing. I believe that we can do the work, but we have to change our psychology, change the way we operate. No longer do we have to be Moses. It's now time to be Joshua and to build. I believe that all of us can do this together. The white community and others are included, but included as second investors into the life and the visions of the Black community. So becoming Joshua is about one man's move towards seeing himself in a different way. I've always been a builder. I've always been a doer. And I realize now that I have fewer years ahead of me than I have behind me. And so I'm even more excited about doing this great work. So Bill, that is my talk, and I will answer any questions or with any discussion. But again, I encourage everybody to get a copy. It's free. And when you do, after you read it, let me know what you think.
Thank you very much, Damon. I think, Alice, you put up the website for everybody to get a copy. Barb Rohr, if somebody wants a physical copy, what's the best way to get an actual copy?
There are copies at the church and at Rochelle, and I know Barb has copies.
Okay, what's the number to call there, or the?
You can call 721-2355. Ask for Mikey. Give her your address, and she will mail you a copy.
All right. So there are 2 ways to get it. We can get it online or get an actual copy, physical copy.
Yeah, or you can stop by the Summit Center in Roselawn. I didn't mention the Summit Center, but it's the old JCC that our church has purchased and have brought it back to life for the community. So we're proud of that as well.
Well, Damon Lynch has given us much to talk about here. I'm sure there's some questions and comments, and let's go from there.
Bill?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank Reverend Lynch. You know, he's just phenomenal. You know, what he's done for our community, you know, we can't thank him enough. But this is really exciting. I just downloaded the book. So Alice, thank you for putting that, because I was just about to call to Michael to say, you know, how do we get a copy? And then I was going to call our editor at the Herald to see whether or not he already had his copy, because he's writing about this now. But thank you. So now I've got my copy, and I just can't wait to read it. I mean, this is really exciting. And, you know, Reverend Lynch is always forward thinking, and, you know, really just someone who just helps us to move forward in such a positive way. So I'm really excited about this. And the solar energy is something I think we hadn't thought about. It's interesting that African Americans don't have a segment of the, you know, business community that, you know, we really specialize in. And so that's, you know, that's a very interesting concept.
Thank you, Jan Michelle. Good to see you.
Other comments or questions, or I'm sure they're out there. One thing I think, Damon, you did such a good job in the book about was describing how without economic development in the community economic development, so often, whether African American or poor white, you're left out of the picture because the development comes in and displaces you. And I think that you really get that across very strongly, besides the emphasis on using all the methods of community change and economic development to bring them together to build a community.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, the power that development and developers have. I mean, we have 3 former city council persons who are up for federal charges, but in the mix of each of those 3 developers are in the middle of that, and that ought to tell us something. That ought to give us pause. And so we lose 3 young, vibrant city council persons, and they're being held accountable, but the developers aren't. And developers are part of that equation. And I see it, there are a lot of people posting, I don't know if it's on the Facebook page or, but yeah, any thoughts that people have and want to share, as Jan Michelle said, we are excited. Our church has a solar array, 352 solar panels on our property. We want to bring that energy to the community. And so we're going to work with Donnell and Block Power and be able to hire people, to train people in this burgeoning industry. The same reason that I went into the medical marijuana field. I knew it was a burgeoning industry, but also it's not that I, the preacher, wanted to sell marijuana, but it's that I knew too many of us were going to allow this to pass us by. And I think this time especially with a new president in office, that we need to harness this. And as I said, who better than those kissed by the sun to harness the power of the sun?
I was going to say, I know there are people, Bill, I don't know if you're seeing people with their hands raised. I saw Kelly Prather and Doc Christensen and John.
Yeah, let's hear from Dot Christensen. Okay. Where are you, Dot? Or Kelly? Kelly? I don't know whether you're muted or not.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I am Kelly Prather. I'm a proud member of New Prospect Baptist Church, and I am so excited that I jumped on this call today, on this Zoom call today. I'm also a friend of the Community Conversations. I think that Pastor Lynch's presentation just brought everything full circle. It helped me to understand all of the dynamics behind destroying a community. I'm happy that he did mention Jeff Pastor and Tamaya Denard and PG Sittenfield, because the way that ordeal, the way that it ends up, it's going to be all telling as to how the structural injustice and racial injustice is present in this county. My prayer, I continue to pray for all 3 council members, but if Tamaya Denard and Jeff Pastor are convicted and PG Sittenfield is not, that again that brings up some other issues, and I think that would be really unfair. But it's also telling that you can pay your way out of trouble if you are not a Black person. And then I'm happy that he also mentioned that the developers who were involved are not being brought up on charges, because the corruption and collusion in Hamilton County is real, especially as it relates to destroying a community. And so I think that, it was divine intervention that I even looked on Pastor Lynch's page and made myself a part of this conversation, made myself available to be a part of this conversation, because we need to continue having these conversations. And we also need to work to empower leaders who understand how things happen. So I am a candidate for mayor of Cincinnati. I just had to give a shameless plug for myself, but I am concerned about everything that Pastor Lynch has said. I understand how communities are destroyed, and I just think that we need to work towards justice and continue having these conversations. But Pastor, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I'll be in touch, and I'm happy that I did have an opportunity to come on and be a part of this meeting today. I miss being down at Christ Church Cathedral.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's some questions on the chat if you want me to.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
Yeah, to those who are responding, because I see
Hello?
questions on a chat. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Vanita Tate, and I am a member of New Prospect Baptist Church, have been for approximately 4 years. And I just wanted to ask Pastor Lynch directly if he remember something called Focus Ministry Group.
Yes, I used to get their emails. Yes.
No, that's something that I wrote up. And I gave it to you, and your minister, your assistant pastor, a couple of years ago. Okay, and I just wanted to know if there was some way that I could possibly help, because I'm truly worried by your book and everything you've said today, and I would like to be a part of it. And
sure.
I just wanted to know I was on board with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Sure, you can be a part. Yep, you are a part. Thank you.
Other responses?
Yeah, from Carolyn Miller.
Oh, Carolyn Miller, yes.
Okay, let me.
From Carolyn Miller, let me
repeat the question. What role do you see for the city of Cincinnati in helping this effort?
What role do you see for the city of Cincinnati in helping this community neighborhood building effort? What role can the city play as a government? That's a question from Carolyn Miller.
Okay. Yeah, I think the city has multiple roles. The city is involved with zoning. The city has funding efforts of the communities. The city has a role in helping make sure that communities are safe. Everything that the city does is a role. I just think that at the city level and other institutions and in the Black community, as I said, we have to change how we do business, though. The city has a community and economic development part of it, but we have to remove the and. It's community economic development. The city should be second investors into helping after the communities decide what they want to do and how they want to do it. And if nothing else, the city should not stand in the way. So, I mean, the city's role is to do what the city does, but it has to just be a different way of thinking and how it's done. Even for philanthropy, we have an awesome philanthropic community in Cincinnati, and they will fund your work to feed people and pass out PPE, and they will give you tens of thousands of dollars. But oftentimes they won't give you money to invest in something that will bring a return on investment. So you can build your organizations, not just on grant dollars, but on dollars that are used to build something that's an asset producing or revenue producing asset. So there's just some small things that we need to do that I think can have a big impact.
This is Georgia Brown speaking. I think we really need to take a good look at when you talk about what the developers are doing. There's when we look at the rubrics, like the Peasley rubric, and then look at the thing that Landsman is trying to present, And as I had mentioned to him, it's just another way for the city to try to make the decision. Then they come and ask you, how do you like it? Instead of coming to the community first and finding out what the community wants for their community, for more involvement in what's happening. Because if we don't do that, if we don't, the communities don't have enough say so about what's happening, it'll be another, again, where they'll come in and just take over and put in what they like. And those that are on the lower end of the spectrum will be the ones that'll be left out. And sometimes I think people think because of the inequities that we have, we're expected to do the same as those that have resources. So we need to really I think, Pastor Lynch, I'm really proud of you, what you're presenting here, because I think it's awesome. But again, I think we do need to take a closer look at what's happening when it comes to what the developers are doing in all the neighborhoods. We've been meeting about every other week, I believe. So I don't know if you have access to that or not, but I can forward the information, the meeting times and everything to you.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you brought up, that's a great point to bring up, that rubric, that development rubric that the Peasley Neighborhood Center is trying to promote with the city, because it really gets to your point, Damon, of having some kind of criteria for a development to come into a neighborhood, rather than just the development get city tax abatement and things like that and come into the neighborhood without working with the people that live there. Right. What's your response to that?
I mean, well, yeah, that's clear. I mean, part of any rubric is development without displacement, but even that, you're still giving the developers, if they're not from the community, if it's not a community-driven initiative, they still have power over your community. I mean, we've watched what happened in Over the Rhine. We've seen it. We see what's coming up Reading Road as the Port Authority purchases Jordan Crossing, everything that's available that the port now owns. As a community, as an African-American community, we need to build our own structures to develop our own communities that benefit everybody. So nobody has to leave. We need to become more entrepreneurial. There are opportunities, they're out there. So when you see blight in the community, you can also look at it as opportunity in the community. And when our church purchased the old JCC, it sat vacant for 4 years. And so if you lived in Roselawn, you drove by this vacant 22-acre site for 4 years. And I'm saying, if you live there and you see it, it's time the community come together and say, what are we going to do with it? Not what is somebody else going to do, not what's the city going to do, but what are we going to do? And we can do it. So that's part of the message of being a Joshua, is that be strong and courageous, and let's take the promises.
Other questions or responses?
Well, let me say this, but I was on a Zoom call earlier. I think the Business Courier did it about racial equity. Yeah. With Renee Mahaffey Harris and Ellen Katz and others. And somebody made the comment, I think, or a question, and it was to the effect of, when are white people going to realize that the work of racial reconciliation is their work, and when are white people going to realize that they have to do it? And I'm listening to that, and I've heard that before. And my initial thought is, that's the most like disempowering conversation I've ever heard. And as a Black person, why do I still want to put the onus on equity and justice on white people to give it to me, when it's something that we as a people can get and do for ourselves? And I just think, again, the idea of becoming Joshua is moving from needing to be saved to now let's go build.
I believe Janice Seymour has had her hand up. Janice? Where are you, Janice?
She's there. She's smiling. She probably is muted.
You may be muted, Janice. I'm not sure.
She is muted.
Oh, you are muted.
Just to unmute.
You have to unmute. Guess not.
Cannot hear you, Janice. Cannot hear you.
Susan Noonan, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you.
Oh, good to see you too.
Good.
I'm downloading your book.
Thank you, dear. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Chat response
Question
from
how allies can donate to help and where and how to do that best?
Yeah, the best way to do that is through CEAI. You can go to CEAI Cincy, CINCY.org. That is a not-for-profit development or a not-for-profit at CDC that we set up with its initial focus on Bond Hill and Roselawn and the Reading Road corridor. But we also do development around the city. So I would contact CEAI and you can help. With the solar project, our initial goal is to raise $75,000, which will pay for our consultants and for them to come here and to take a group to Brooklyn, New York to see the work that they've done. I would encourage you to look up Block Power, BLOCPOWER, and see the work that they've done in Brooklyn with low and moderate income communities and churches and bringing clean and safe energy to those communities. It is an awesome job. So we're excited that they are willing to come to Cincinnati and work with us.
and yeah,
Yes, I had one question, Reverend Lynch. Do you have other niche projects you may have in the in your list of things to do?
Man, I don't know if I need anything else to do. So we just opened a dispensary. I have this church. I have people who love me and I love them. So, I'm pastoring every single day. We have a nature center on our campus with great Hamilton County great parks. We have a 4-acre campsite on our campus, actually, that we're proud of. We have the grocery store in Bond Hill. We have a piece of land that we're co-owners with the Port Authority on Section Road, and we're building affordable housing in Roselawn. Right now, and the main project I'm focused on now is the solar project. So that's enough on one plate.
one question that's come in on chat are, what are the largest obstacles that stand in the way of people developing their own communities?
Inequity.
Yeah, I think the first thing is vision and belief in yourself, belief that you can do it. That if you overcome that one, the other obstacles are smaller. I mean, we could talk about funding and the dollars that are needed, but it starts with just believing that you can take a 20-acre site in Roselawn as the Summit Center and bring it back to life, believing that you can open up a bakery as we did when our church was in Over the Rhine for the community. So part of my leadership is to lead people to believe, yes, we can do it. There will always be obstacles. We can have a discussion on, racism and inequities. But we started this conversation today on a theological basis. And we're going to believe God that we have the ability to do it. I pastor a Black church, and we say all kind of great things. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I mean, we preach this, we read this. We got to practice it. We can do it. And we are doing it. That's the real part of this message. We are doing it. So whatever the obstacles are, they can be overcome.
So in a sense, it's what you say in the book, it's developing that group in the community that believe that they can do it and come together.
Yeah. So, Marshall Gans, when he talked about working with the food workers, and he said they were out trying to organize, and they were going to people's homes, and he would hear people say, "No se puede, no se puede, no se puede." Couldn't do it against the United Farm Workers Union. So finally, they had to get people to say, "Sí se puede," yes, we can. And when he finally got them to believe that, they were able to take on conglomerates and giants and win. And Marshall Gans worked on Barack Obama's campaign, and that's where he got the phrase, "Yes, we can," from his conversations with Marshall Gans. So yes, we can do it.
Other thoughts, comments? And
Yes, Reverend Lynch, question. Women's City Club we're having a program on February 18th on the charter amendment, which is asking for 50 million in the city budget for affordable housing. And I just wondered how you feel about that. Or actually, you don't have to say, but I would like to invite you to that charter,
Okay.
that program. We're going to talk about pros and cons and different alternatives, to that 50 million, because if we don't do something about affordable housing, people don't have a place to live, to go to their jobs, kids go to school.
Right.
It's such a crisis. So in conjunction with what you're doing, affordable housing could have solar heating.
Right. Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that's the program. That's what they're bringing from Brooklyn here, is that affordable housing will have solar heating. Sister Barbara Bush is already doing some of this in Cumminsville. So yeah, I love the $50 million figure. It's actually written in this booklet because we asked the city for $50 million as well to revitalize our communities. 3CDC got its start with $50 million, which allowed it to do the banks in Fountain Square and over the Rhine. And too often, when you're a serviced community, or you're not part of economic development, you're part of community and the economic development part, then you get small grants to do small things, while the economic development side gets money to do bigger and larger things.
I had a question. I live in Springfield Township, which is really has actually the Winton Woods School District has kids from, you won't believe this, over 100 different countries, but primarily we're African American and Caucasian, but it's quite a mix. But I'm only bringing this up because it's not the city, but it's the same thing you're talking about. So don't forget about the county.
Right.
And then also, I happen to be a member of Bellarmine Chapel, which is Xavier University, and they've been active for years supporting some of the things you're talking about. And just so you know, today I'm getting my last COVID shot.
All right.
Me and my wife, and when on the way home, I'm going to be to show you what we're trying to do. Is I'm going to be buying my Valentine cookies on Reading Road, and I'm going up Reading Road. I'm buying flowers for my wife, and we're working with the African American businesses along that line. So in other words, we're trying to support. I personally, in our group, are trying to support in that way that we can utilize the services. And we're working through the African American Chamber of Commerce also. So we're basically what we're trying to end up with. It'll take a while. Maybe you could be of some help to us, but we want to put together, remember the old yellow pages?
Yeah.
We want to have the yellow pages of African American businesses to show everybody, and everybody will know where these businesses are, and so they can utilize them. That's all I have to say.
Great, thank you. And I think there is a document out similar to that. It's called the Black Pages. That is a book of African American businesses in our city.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah.
I'll have to call your office and ask them for it.
Okay. All right.
I have a Black business directory on my website as well. It was started by Councilmember Maya Denard several years ago, and we've just continued it. So that's another resource. I'm really excited. Sorry to jump in. I'm just really excited about, the idea of going, up Reading Road and patronizing Black businesses. I think that's wonderful. But I also want to give a shout out to Reverend Lynch when the idea of vaccinations was just brought up, because he did vaccinations at his church yesterday from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. It was a great people. People were there early. They were excited. The vaccine almost now is like, precious gold, precious metals. And if you're able to get in, people will knock down your doors to do so. So it was great yesterday.
Let's see, Georgia Brown, did you have a question too?
No, not at this time. I'm just listening. Very excited.
All right.
Thank you.
Other comments, responses?
I wanted to respond to Sister Georgia Brown's remark about Greg Landsman's scorecard for the development project. My spirit just keeps telling me that we need to do a comprehensive audit of all of these development projects that have taken place in the city of Cincinnati from 2001, the period of unrest, until present, because a lot of it is not benefiting the community. I'm also excited to hear that they are looking to do a $50 million charter amendment. I think that we need to look at the charter and right the wrongs. I mean, we have a 42% African-American population, and it's sad that African-American homeowners have lost their homes. Businesses have been closed down. And so we really need to take a comprehensive look at that and hold individuals accountable. My heart still just breaks for those, the youngest members of Cincinnati City Council who got caught up. I think that God works in his way, and I ran for city council alongside those individuals. And I know Tamaya is a great person. Jeff Pastor is a great person. And I think that there's a lot more to it. And it's all telling that David DeVillers, the U.S. attorney, is stepping down as of February 28th. So, I think that this is an opportunity to reelect Jan Michelle Lemon Kearney, who's on this call, who I love dearly, and also elect some powerful members of city council who are looking to rebuild the city in a way that's going to benefit those who have been disproportionately disenfranchised, and that would be communities of color, specifically the Black community. So I'm just excited to just be in this space, and I'm excited that God gave me an opportunity to come back to Cincinnati and see how it had been ruined, and then to even allow me to have a wilderness experience where I was mad at the entire world and mentally and psychologically broken as a well-educated Black woman and separated from my church. And so I thank God for Pastor Lynch. And we've had these conversations offline. I think that the Joshua project is much needed, and I want to do everything in my power to be a part of it and to promote it. So again, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this, encouraging me to listen in. And I just, I'm really thankful for the other leaders who are on this call: Georgia Brown, Jan Michelle Lemon Kearney, Iris.
All right, I think we lost it. All right, thanks, Kelly.
Prince Brown, do you have any comments? Or
I was going to say what.
So that was my comment.
Yeah, Kelly, I wanted to say when I mentioned Landsman, my point is we need to really take a good look at it, because it's one of those deals again where the city will have a control. Like I said, they'll come back and tell you what they want to do instead of finding out from the community first what they need. So when I mention that is because we do need to take a look at that and compare it to the one from the Peasley rubrics. And also if there's others out there, we need to be developing something else if that's not going to be what the city needs for the communities.
Thank you.
Reverend Lynch?
Yes.
Hey, this is Iris. I just wanted to let everyone know, if you're interested and you're so kind, after you've listened to Reverend Lynch, you want to send any donations to the CEAI, I put the address and the website in the chat and then the link. And thank you to the last lady that just was speaking about the Peasley rubric. It is an awesome development tool that the city should have taken into consideration 2 or 3 years ago when it was first developed. But I agree with you. I thank you for presenting and writing becoming Joshua. It is the next generation. We've done a lot around police reform in this city. It is time for America to wake up and take its rightful place and restore what was taken from African Americans. Just based on what you said and all that we know that has happened across this country, it is just time.
And thank you, Ms. Iris.
I want to let our author and Pastor Lynch have the final comments, some final words from you in terms of where we go from here.
Well, Bill, again, I want to thank you and Ed for allowing me to share. I think I just would ask everybody to please read the writing. And after you've read it, connect with me. Call the church, send me an email. We'll continue to tell and talk about the initiatives that we have planned, the work that we're currently doing. When the gentleman mentioned going up Reading Road to buy cookies from Davis Cookies, our organization, CEAI, actually owns half of that shopping strip. And so the work is being done. It just has to bring a larger group of people together to get it done, and with larger vision. So I just let people know I am committed to this work. I'm excited about it. And those who want to join, I saw somebody mention that when I spoke at a church in Anderson, I had a great conversation with them. There are people out here, they're just waiting for the clarion call to get busy. So hopefully we'll put that call out soon.
Well, we want to thank you for the work that you're doing, and everybody ought to read this. I think it really does set a path for economic freedom, and it lays it down in such a way that connects with the whole community of religious community in terms of linking it to the Gospels and the Old Testament, especially Exodus with Moses and then Joshua leading into the promised land. So we're awfully thankful to have you here today, but the work certainly goes on, and we'll continue to talk to you and do more Zoom forums around these issues. So everybody get their COVID shots.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now, I believe we'll be